Today, we are going to explore the poem Ode on Solitude by Alexander Pope, one of the most important poets of the Augustan age. What makes this poem truly remarkable is that Pope wrote it at the very young age of 12, yet it reflects a deep and mature understanding of life. In this poem, Pope presents his idea of an ideal life, a life of simplicity, peace, self-sufficiency, and freedom from worldly ambition. He shows us that true happiness does not come from wealth, fame, or power, but from contentment and inner calm. As we go through this poem, we will see how Pope combines philosophy, nature, and personal reflection to create a timeless vision of human happiness. Let's learn more about Alexander Pope. Now let us look at the early life of Alexander Pope. Pope is considered one of the greatest poets of the Augustan age, also known as the Neoclassical Age, a period that valued reason, order, and classical learning. He was born in London into a Roman Catholic family at a time when Catholics faced serious restrictions in England. Because of this, he was denied access to formal education and public opportunities. Despite these challenges, Pope educated himself by reading the works of great classical writers like Homer, Virgil, and Horace. Another major difficulty in his life was his health. He suffered from a serious illness called tuberculosis of the spine, which affected his growth and caused him lifelong physical pain. These early struggles shaped his personality and deeply influenced his thoughts, which we can clearly see reflected in his poetry. Now let us look at the major works and distinctive features of Alexander Pope. Some of his most important works include The Rape of the Lock, which is a famous mock epic, essay on criticism, and essay on man, both of which deal with literary and philosophical ideas. He also translated Homer's great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which brought him wide recognition. Pope is especially known for his mastery of the heroic couplet, a poetic form written in rhyming iambic pentameter. His poetry is marked by satire, balance, harmony, and clarity of expression. An important fact to remember is that Ode on Solitude was written when Pope was only 12 years old. Unlike his later satirical works, this poem is deeply personal and philosophical, reflecting the idea that true happiness lies in simplicity, an idea influenced by Epicurean philosophy. Now let us understand the title of the poem, Ode on Solitude. An ode is a lyrical poem that expresses deep personal emotion and reflection. It is usually written to celebrate or explore a particular idea. In this case, Pope is reflecting on the idea of solitude. The word solitude here does not mean loneliness or sadness. Instead, it refers to a peaceful state of being alone, where a person feels calm, content, and free from disturbance. The title suggests a celebration of a simple rural life, away from the pressures of society, ambition, and corruption. It presents solitude as a positive and desirable condition. The deeper meaning is that solitude represents a state of self-sufficiency and inner peace, where a person finds true happiness within themselves rather than in the external world. Now let us look at the historical and literary context of the poem. Ode on Solitude belongs to the Augustan age, also known as the Neoclassical Age, which spans the late 17th and early 18th centuries. This period was dominated by the ideals of reason, order, balance, and imitation of classical Greek and Roman literature. Writers focused on clarity, discipline, and moral instruction. However, what is interesting about this poem is that it does not fully follow the strict rules of neoclassical writing. Instead, it moves in a different direction. In Ode on Solitude, we can see early signs of what later becomes Romanticism. The poem shows a deep love for nature, a focus on personal feelings, and an inward emotional reflection. Rather than emphasizing society and reason alone, Pope highlights individual peace and simplicity. Because of these qualities, the poem is often described as a proto-romantic or transitional text. It stands between two literary movements, combining neoclassical structure with emerging romantic ideas. Now let us move to the structural and formal analysis of the poem. The poem is written in a very simple and balanced form. It consists of 5 quatrains, that is, 5 stanzas with 4 lines each. The rhyme scheme followed is ABAB, and the meter is iambic tetrameter, which gives the poem a smooth and gentle rhythm. This structure is very important because it reflects the central idea of the poem. The simplicity of the form mirrors the simplicity of the ideal life that Pope is describing. There is no complexity or ornamentation, just like the peaceful and content life of the ideal man. We can also notice a contrast when we compare this poem with Pope's later works. In his later poetry, he uses complex heroic couplets, but here the style is plain, musical, and lyrical. If we look at the progression of the stanzas, we can see a clear structure. The first stanza introduces the ideal man. The second focuses on material self-sufficiency. The third presents the idea of time and peace. The fourth describes a balanced daily life. Finally, the fifth stanza concludes with a quiet and simple attitude towards death. So, the structure of the poem follows a complete life journey, from the ideal way of living to the peaceful acceptance of death. Now let us move to the first stanza and understand it line by line. The poem begins with the line, "Happy the man, whose wish and care are bounded by a few paternal acres." Here, Pope immediately introduces his idea of the ideal man. According to him, a truly happy person is not someone who desires a lot, but someone whose wishes are limited. The phrase, paternal acres, refers to ancestral land, meaning land inherited from one's family. This suggests stability, tradition, and a simple way of life. The word, bound, is very important because it shows limitation, but this limitation is not negative. Instead, it suggests that when a person limits their desires, they actually achieve greater happiness. In the next line, "Content to breathe his native air," Pope emphasizes the idea of contentment. The man is satisfied with his own environment and does not feel the need to travel, explore, or seek pleasure elsewhere. He finds joy in his own surroundings. This reflects a deep sense of belonging and acceptance. The final line, "in his own ground," reinforces this idea further. The man lives peacefully on his own land, without depending on others or seeking external success. It highlights self-sufficiency and independence. So, if we look at the stanza as a whole, Pope is presenting a clear message. True happiness comes from simplicity, limited desires, and contentment with what one already has. The ideal life is not about expansion or ambition, but about stability, peace, and inner satisfaction. Now let us move to the second stanza, where Pope develops the idea of self-sufficiency in detail. The stanza begins with the line, "whose herds with milk, whose fields with bread." Here, Pope describes a man whose basic needs are fully met by his own surroundings. Herds with milk refers to cattle that provide milk, and fields with bread refers to agricultural land that produces crops, especially grains for making bread. These two images represent the most essential needs of human life, food and nourishment. In the next line, "whose flocks supply him with attire," Pope continues this idea. Flocks refers to sheep, which provide wool. This wool is used to make clothing. So, the man does not depend on markets or society for his basic needs. Everything he requires comes from his own land and resources. The third line, "whose trees in summer yield him shade," introduces the comfort provided by nature. During the summer, trees offer shade, protecting him from heat. This shows how nature takes care of his well-being in different seasons. Finally, in the line, "in winter fire," the trees again become useful, this time as firewood to provide warmth during the cold season. This shows that nature is not only generous but also consistent throughout the year. If we look at the stanza as a whole, Pope presents a complete picture of a self-sufficient life. The man does not rely on external systems like trade, society, or wealth. Instead, he lives in harmony with nature, which provides everything he needs: food, clothing, shelter, and comfort. The key idea here is that the ideal life is a self-sufficient life, where a person depends on nature and lives simply, without unnecessary desires or dependencies. Now let us move to the third stanza, where Pope shifts his focus from material life to the experience of time and inner peace. The stanza begins with the word, "blessed." which means blessed or truly fortunate. Pope is saying that the person he is describing is not just happy, but deeply blessed. The next phrase, who can unconcernedly find, is very important. The word, unconcernedly, means without worry or anxiety. So, the ideal person is someone who can live without stress, without constantly worrying about the future or regretting the past. In the line, hours, days, and years slide soft away, Pope presents a beautiful image of time passing gently. Time is not rushing, not dragging, and not creating pressure. Instead, it slides smoothly and softly. This suggests a life where time is experienced peacefully, without tension or urgency. The next line, in health of body, peace of mind, introduces two essential aspects of a good life. First is physical health, and second is mental peace. Pope is emphasizing that true happiness depends on both a healthy body and a calm, undisturbed mind. Finally, the line, quiet by day, completes this idea by showing that the person's daily life is calm and free from disturbance. There is no noise, no conflict, no stress, only quietness and stability. If we look at the stanza as a whole, Pope is presenting a very important idea. Happiness is not just about having enough resources, but about how we experience time. When life is simple and the mind is peaceful, time itself becomes gentle and enjoyable. The key idea here is that true happiness lies in the peaceful passage of time, supported by physical health and mental calmness.